Apple TV is back with another series where the title starts with S, and that is typically a good sign that the show will be fantastic. Smoke is a new crime drama that stars Taron Egerton and Jurnee Smollett. It's got some feels of Backdraft, but can the story captivate us for 9 episodes? A troubled detective and an enigmatic arson investigator follow in the footsteps of 2 serial arsonists. Alright, so let's just get this out of the way right up front. If you watched the trailer, you certainly got hints of Ron Howard's Backdraft. But what you also probably got was a strong feeling for how the story was gonna play out. And you'd be right on both counts. There is a reveal that happens at the end of episode 2, which drops together with episode 1. And even as I was watching the rest of the show, I was a bit concerned at how this was going to play out and if the entire series could hold my attention all the way through. The mystery for this surrounds a city that is dealing with 2 different serial arsonists. They have different MOs, different territories, and different patterns, making it difficult for authorities to nail them down. Egerton is Dave Goodson, an arson investigator, and Jurnee Smollett plays Michelle Calderon, the police detective that is assigned to assist in these investigations. Now, their dynamic, it is contentious and strained, but sometimes playful, and they each have their own baggage and demons, leading them to be equally acerbic. And not only do they rub each other wrong on most occasions, but they also tweak out just about everybody else they come in contact with, whether as partners or on their own. Now, Goodson is a tough guy to root for. We know he's got a damaged past and deals with emotional trauma, but he's also just gruff and rude and flies off the handle in sporadic ways. He's erratic and chaotic, and then he's also self-assured and cocky, so that whole combination just makes him fairly off-putting. And Egerton is fantastic, especially the way that he morphs his character over the course of the show. And even though he's never really charismatic or likable, I loved how his changes came about slowly. He's twitchy and aggressive, while also showing this skittishness that makes his persona appear like a facade that's meant to hide weakness and self-doubt. And that struggle, it's evident in the muscular twitches in Egerton's face and jaw, creating this very real and palpable personality trait. And Calderon isn't much better. With her traumatic past, we have a much better picture and understanding, so she certainly comes across as the more sympathetic one, but she's also explosive and has her own brand of chaos, which leads to surprising outcomes as the show goes along. And Smollett is tough and jaded, skeptical, and then watchful of everything and everyone. And her body posture falls right in line with how the character is explained to be. Somebody who is strong, but struggling under the weight of all of the horrors of her past. Now, in addition to the 2 leads, the supporting cast, it's a strong one, made up of people like Rafe Spall, Greg Kinnear, Natari Guma Mabaho Muine, and I am sure I mispronounced his name, so I apologize, John Leguizamo, and Adina Porter. And they all craft indelible performances, especially Kinnear, Muine, and Leguizamo. Now, Kinnear, he's playing an almost retired fire investigator. He's on the downward slide of his gig and just riding out his time until retirement. But because the arsonists have not been stopped yet, it's putting a huge snag in his ease out of the job. Kinnear captures the loyalty and brotherhood that firefighters have with each other, but also gets to show some of the grumpy old man persona that matches a guy who can smell the freedom of retirement right in front of him, but is being prevented from grasping it due to the lack of progress by his staff. Now, Leguizamo, he is all over the place in this, and that's not a criticism at all. I mean, he's disgraced, looked upon as conspiratorial and crazy, and then does some questionable work for a living. But his mix of humor, wit, and then earnestness ultimately makes him somebody that I was cheering on. We're supposed to discount him and look down on him. And when we meet him, it's pretty easy to do. I mean, he's just the type of person. But once his character is unfolded for us, we get to see the layers that he contains, which then makes him endearing. And finally, we have Muine, and this guy probably had the toughest role in the series. He has to be a mousy persona, barely there, almost invisible. His speech pattern is just frustratingly slow and then barely above a whisper, creating this character who has been overlooked and taken advantage of his entire life. And it's easy to give him sympathy. But there are times when I just wanted to kick him in the butt and get him to stand up. His storyline is ultimately heartbreaking, even though his life is sprinkled with people who are truly friendly to him. Now, as I'd mentioned earlier, the series gives us a pretty big reveal right in the first 2 episodes, leaving 7 more for the story to play out and hopefully keep us engaged. And not unlike a lot of other mysteries or thriller series, when we get a reveal so soon in the story, the rest just becomes that pursuit. Now, sometimes it's a game of cat and mouse. Other times it's simply watching the investigation play out as the detectives move closer or farther away from solving the case. And the same takes place here. Thankfully, the reveal we get isn't the only mystery that's unfolding, so there are other arcs in play to keep the entertainment going. I also appreciated how the story introduced some unexpected complications that threw a huge wrench into the plot lines, making the character progressions more complex and messy than they already were. This helps with the tension, but at times it also feels like it's something thrown in to justify the remaining episodes. As might be expected, there are some plot conveniences and implausibilities that do make their way into the story just to keep it flowing. These are sometimes noticeable and aggravating. Other times they just create some annoyance at how the illusion for the story is then broken. For example, we watch a character walk into a location that is filled with an accelerant. Now, it's not a unique substance, but instead of instantly identifying what it is and then exiting the area, the character just continues to walk in, placing themselves in certain danger. And while this can be something that's kind of overlooked as just a mild annoyance because of a dumb character decision, this action leads to something much larger, which is then totally unbelievable given the circumstances. Another character is involved in a situation that leads to them needing assistance from somebody sketchy. In context, this makes sense, but it then progresses to a sequence that feels as though it would have been very noticeable, and then points to ramifications that could come in a future season. But the show doesn't conclude as though it feels like it will continue on in another season. There are other times when we see the after effects of an action, but are not shown the actual thing that began the issue. Now, I know we can speculate and infer the beginning, but what we're shown doesn't line up with what occurs, leaving us question if something was just happenstance or not. I know that part was incredibly vague and probably difficult to follow, but to name any of the actions or the effects would be a spoiler, and I'm doing my best to stay away from those. There are still other portions within the narrative that are introduced and then never touched on again, creating these gaps in storytelling that made me wonder why it was even brought up in the first place, other than to amp up drama. But without a resolution to the idea, it's just useless dialogue that leads us nowhere. Something I loved, and probably out of the entire show, was the parting image. It's effective, and it works to solidify the mindsets we'd watch play out, as well as then creating this haunting visual that demonstrates the duality of people. And overall, Smoke is a thrilling crime drama that envelops us like a fire inside a structure thanks to complex and damaged characters and a twisty psychological examination of how trauma influences our behaviors. The show does outstay its welcome, meandering through some storylines and not finishing others, while teasing out an investigation we already know the answer to. The pursuit, it's engaging, but could be trimmed. And despite plot conveniences, both large and small, the acting is gripping despite the lack of heroes within the story. Because each episode contains enough surprises or twists, the show should draw you back week after week, especially thanks to them all being close to an hour in length. There's sex, some nudity, a ton of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give Smoke 3.5 out of 5 couches. So have you seen any great crime thrillers lately? I'd love to hear about what you watched in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.